Hello, everybody. We are the Geeks and the Giants, and today we're joined by a guest. Hello, CEO.
Hello.
But yes, I am Enzo. This is my forever co-host John. Today we talk about Pride and Prejudice from 2005. We brought CEO along because we're two men talking about a Jane Austen novel, so I don't think that would sit well with a lot of people.
Not gonna lie, I was already having nosebleeds watching this movie. I'm just like, what the fuck are they talking about?
Right?
She has no prospects? How dare she?
Right. Right? So to both of you, and I'll answer this question as well. How did you get into this movie, or how did you first find it?
I'll let our guests start.
All right.
Um, I have gone through multiple Pride and Prejudice phases in my life. Um, for me, it started with I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Lizzie Bennet diaries. Like, I'm sure everyone oh,
I
no,
have no
that's so
idea what that
sad. I'm so glad I'm here then. This
Yeah.
proves the point. The Lizzie Bennet diaries was basically like a series of mini episodes where they reenacted or recreated Pride and Prejudice, but through vlogging. Like, it was just like a modern woman vlogging, and her name was Lizzie, and she had a family, and then they just did the whole story of Pride and Prejudice. So that had that had me in a chokehold for a while as a young teen. So then, um, I heard that there was a Pride and Prejudice movie, and I was like, okay, let me watch it, and it's great. I love the movie so much. So yeah,
Hmm.
from the Lizzie Bennet diaries, I watched the movie.
I do know that there is a Colin Firth version.
Yeah, the that was like the first movie.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
people compare them.
Ah.
Which one do you think is better? Did you watch both?
I haven't watched both.
Ah.
Surprisingly, I know because I've read the book and I watched the movie, um, and Lizzie Bennet Diaries. But yeah, I haven't watched because I don't know. In my brain, especially as someone who watched it as a young teen, yeah, maybe in my preteens probably. The 2005 Pride and Prejudice is just immortalized. I put it up on a pedestal because I love the
Hmm.
movie so much.
I guess it's our equivalent of how Dune is. There was clearly a Dune in the 80s, but there's
Oh,
a
yeah,
new
yeah,
one
yeah.
where
I get that.
the spotlight is here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, for me, first time watching it, girlfriend, she was just like, "You have to watch Pride and Prejudice." I was like, oh, "Okay," because Mr. Darcy's an asshole. I'm like, "Okay, I don't know who that is." So I'm going at it, and she was like, "Yeah, they don't have money. That's why she's selling her off to richer men." I'm like, "Oh my god!" And yeah, I do want to watch Bridgerton with my girlfriend and just want to get into the whole Regent era kind of
Yeah.
universe. So I'm like, yeah, all right, let's try Pride and Prejudice, and then get started on Bridgerton. And yeah, that's where I got exposed, and I'm just like, not gonna lie, the gossip was there. I was like, oh, Mr. Wickham, who? I'm like, shit.
Mr. Wickham did what?
He's a piece of shit. I'm like, what?
Right.
He's in it for the money. Yeah. Spoilers. But yeah, watching it, I was already kind of like, okay. I did understand a couple of the sentences because it is using very thick old English, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I think I got what they're trying to say. I have to go to my girlfriend. What did they mean? Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of a door that's opened that a lot of preteen girls kind of got introduced to, and now a 20-plus-year-old man is opened eyes. I'm like, oh my god, the gossip.
Oh,
yeah.
well, speaking of which, I did try this years ago because I was like, I'm into history. I like history pieces.
Oh.
And then I was watching it, being like, oh, they're just talking. Okay.
When do they behead
Really
somebody?
historical about it.
And then I was like, well, talking movies are fine. Let's see what it is all about. And then I just turned it off, and I'm like, yeah, I can't follow this. But
Yeah.
I've tried it several times.
we were. It wasn't. We weren't the demographic, mate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
clearly. But like
Clearly, sorry.
now, like I guess it was like during the pandemic where I'm like I'm gonna sit down and try, and like it's only I will admit it's only this year where I'm like I will try completely, and I did watch it obviously for this video and to be like yeah I watched it, and like yeah I do like it. Like obviously there are things I won't get because I'm a man, so
You're
I'm like.
just a man.
Yeah. And there are things where they say things where I'm like, I don't get this old English. It's kind of like watching The King in Netflix, and I'm like, I don't understand Timothy Chalamet, but that's fine. They're fighting, and that's cool. Whereas here, I'm like, why does he not like her? Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
But yeah, going into it, like, there, before watching this, I was like, yeah, I don't really care much about this Victorian era history period. And like watching it, I was like, I'm wrong by myself. It's not even the Victorian era. Damn. But like the movie buff in me is like, I do like the costumes. Like the costumes are pretty grand, and like just seeing how they recreated, I guess, post American Revolution England. I'm just like, oh, this is pretty sweet. Like, and then when I get to like how men and women interact, I'm like, wow, we have gone. Thank God, times are changing. I don't know if I could live like this.
Not gonna lie. Now that you mentioned costumes, I cannot not see like Mr. Darcy walk in with his coat, like out of the out of the fog. I'm just like,
Oh yeah,
I'm like,
I love that scene so much.
you a dick, but you hot. I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah, but he's misunderstood. I know the end. He's
Yeah.
misunderstood. I got it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that intrigued me by like watching it fully. I'm like, oh, the plot thickens. What did he say? And like I found myself being like, oh damn, she doesn't have what do you call that? The money or the prestige. Like when I know we're going forward a bit, but like when Judi Dench like
Confronts her.
confronts Keira Knightley, I'm like, why are you so mean? I don't understand this.
Yeah. But yeah, like I forgot what it was. I don't know if you could correct me on this. It's just that my girlfriend told me that like in the book they're not that poor.
Hmm.
Like in the movie they're shown to be like very, like below or like middle class, while the others are like really high up there. I don't know if you could correct me on that one, Sia, since you did read the books.
Yeah, they're pretty middle class in the books. Like not with like casually having a pig in the house kind of status, Yeah.
Yeah. Also, the father is a little like, man, why didn't you prep a little bit? Because he was like trying to bank for a son. That's why he has so many daughters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, damn.
Yeah, again, it's funny seeing how society was back then, like especially for England, like versus like our society now, where clearly none of this would hold up in our society now. Where you're like, you said what? Why are you an idiot?
Man, not just that. It's just like the concept of like, oh, you're gonna marry your cousin?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like,
I mean, it's surprising to us, but it was
Yeah.
like normal back then.
I would say though, biggest standout was that forgot the name of the actor, but he was the potato guy. He was like, oh,
the preacher.
exquisite vegetables,
Oh yeah, Mr. Collins.
Mr. Collins.
Yeah, Mr.
I was just like, this guy's such a fucking meme. It's
Yeah.
just like,
He is. Like everyone memes about him when we talk about Pride Prejudice.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
scene where he tells Karen that like I would like to speak to you alone, and then he's like I would like to marry you. I think we would be proper suitors. And I'm like, what are you saying? But
I know.
can you please stop saying what you're saying?
yeah, like a lot of things are just like very tone deaf here when it comes to like the very rich or like very pompous kind of characters.
Yeah. Especially that scene, well, like in the middle of the movie when Mr. Darcy confronts Elizabeth and he's saying all these things. I can't say them
In the
verbally.
rain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the scene that my girlfriend showed me that like kind of got me sold. I'm like, oh my god, said, "What about your family?"
Right?
Like,
I
watch the
know.
movie. What?
He's like, I love you, but wait, I love you despite all of these things.
I'm like,
Like, oh, I'm trying to fight for this love, but you're poor, your family's weird. And she's like, he's like, do you love me too? And she's like, wait up, like rewind back to what you just said. You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, like as Sia said, it was just so odd because it was like I love you. What is, and then like she's just going off about like, despite the current situation of your family. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah, you're like you were doing well for a bit, and then you're like you're poor, your family's weird. One of your sisters ran off because she didn't want to get married, and now she's getting married because of me, or like because I intervened, and you're
I
like,
wasn't part of that confrontation that happened later.
yeah,
oh right,
like yeah. The entire confrontation was just like him being like, I can't take it anymore. I'm gonna explode with feelings. Like
Yeah.
your family's weird.
It's like I love you so much, even though your family's weird, you're poor. Do you love me too? Answer me. And she's like, like,
Yeah.
wait 1 minute.
yeah,
Yeah, I do love the character of Elizabeth. She is
Oh,
Like-
Lizzie, yeah.
like she is a no, that's the point, is that she's a very big standout to what women like women's mindset here in this like kind of era where she speaks her own mind a lot, where a lot of people are kind of like woman, what, you know, a lot of the
Yeah,
guys will be
yeah.
like that.
an independent mind from a woman. How unique,
like-
or like
How
Oh.
dare you?
yeah,
And like, how dare you being rude to me while I'm being rude to you? You know,
Right.
I'm like
Yeah.
Jane Judy Gent.
right. Also, like their mom is like, I've raised you this way so you can be married, and that's it. And you're like, oh, okay. I guess that's their
Yeah.
fate. And back in England, back in the 1700s, I'm like, interesting. Huh.
That's all women could really aspire to back then, was to be married off to a good family. So
Yeah.
that's basically what they were raised, molded to do, not just by their families, by society as well. Like there's that scene where they're in Netherfield and they're visiting. Well, Elizabeth's visiting because Jane is sick, right? And Bingsley's sister says, like, oh, a woman has to be all these things to be considered accomplished. And it's such a long list. Like, she has to play the piano, she has to draw, she has to be artistic, she has to be so, like, her etiquette has to be infallible. And it's like, oh, yeah. The impossible standards that women are held up to in that era is crazy, but, like, you can even still see a little bit of it today.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you could tell that like the desperation of like some characters here as well, where like the friend of Elizabeth, where she just like, I'm gonna take Collins if you guys not gonna take him,
Right.
you know.
That famous line, like, it's such a TikTok, like, it's a big TikTok, like, audio. Like, a lot of people use it, especially on their 27th birthdays. They'll have their cake and they'll be like, I'm 27, I have no prospects, no money, and I'm frightened. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. What else is there? What happened with Jenna Malone's character? She married a soldier and she ran off for a bit. And then-
She went with Mr. Wickham.
Yeah.
Like she ran off and like the mother's like having the vapors and she's like
yeah.
like having a panic attack.
Like, I can't believe you would do this to your own mother, and you're like, okay, sure.
Yeah, because, like, for a woman to have run off with a man unmarried, or even be in the presence of a man unmarried, it's quite scandalous. Like, you will be, I mean, you see that in Bridgerton also. Like, once you fall into a scandal as a woman, you're like basically shunned. You're like persona non grata to everyone, and
Yeah,
that
go on,
extends to
sorry.
your family too. That's why the mother was like,
So sad about it, like so distraught, and you're like
yeah,
it's funny seeing this movie to like modernize and like being like, again, we're just an unfair thing to do because you're like the past is like you can't really change it by watching a movie about it. But again, you're just like, this is so fascinating to see, which is why this movie did win me over when I saw this because I'm like, it's a glimpse into the past, but I'm glad it's not our present. But like, it's always fascinating that movies can show what the past was and not sugarcoat it, which I appreciate. Like movies like it's a different movie, but something like say 13 Years a Slave, where it doesn't sugarcoat anything. You're just like, oh, I get it. And then when you watch Pride and Prejudice, you're like, oh, this is what society was for women back in England post Civil War, American Revolution.
Yeah, it wasn't just like, oh, romance, like Elizabeth with Mr. Darcy kind of deal. It's just like straight up, hey, this is the world that like they used to live in, and it's kind of eye opening too when we start like seeing their perspective. And I will say though, like I do after what Mr. Darcy, pretty much zero aura, horrible riz. It's like this is like, hey, you're beautiful, I love you, but your family weird and kind of poor. And I'm like, all right. He does try to fix it. He does try to mend it without kind of like, making a big deal of it. Where she brings what's his name, Bingsley?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like they bring Mr. Bingsley back and like sets up the sister with him. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. And he pays for like the wedding of the sister who ran away with Mr. Wickham when he is trying to get like somewhat of a ransom.
Yeah, it's not just a wedding he paid for. He paid for like, because women had dowries back then, right? So he paid an exorbitant amount to kind of lessen the cost of like, because families had to pay the man's family when one of their daughters enters it as sort of an upkeep on their living, basically. So that's why there's that scene where Mr. Bennet returns and he's like, "Oh, he agreed to only £100 a year," and then you see the sisters are like, "What? That's kind of like a crazy number, crazy low." And then they're like, "What did Uncle pay?" But now, later on we learned it's Mr. Darcy who actually paid. Like, what did Uncle pay? And it's like, oh, maybe £10,000. Like Mr. Wickham wouldn't have agreed to anything less than £10,000. And you see, even like going up to that scene with, like, to put that number into context, going up to Lady Catherine's house, Mr. Collins is like, "Oh, do you see this house and all its furnishings? Not the furnishings, but like the decorations on it. Everything costs like £20,000. So like, that's like half a mansion's worth of, furnishings, like glazings, and so that's like a lot of money that Mr. Darcy put out for Elizabeth."
Not gonna lie, I think he is the Batman of this universe. The amount of shit he throws. I'm just like very surprised when he's just like,
I mean,
Yes?
just looking at Pemberley and his house, like, it's literally open for people to visit because it's basically a museum with all the art collections they have.
Oh, very true, very true. Like, yeah, like you see like all the Greek statues and all stuff, and like the different paintings. I'm just like, all right, goddamn, Mr. Darcy, all right, you're just a little antisocial. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah. Like, you're not the best at making first impressions, like what he said about Elizabeth at the beginning. I'm like, why are you so mean? You just met this woman.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I do like that. She's just pretty much a straight up like, hey, look, it doesn't matter how much money you got, like you being a dick. So I'm like, I'm gonna call you out on it. And again, pretty much my favorite like character here is Elizabeth because she tells it how it is, and I'm just like, you know what? Yeah, and she's going against the grain. So it's a lot when a lot of characters are very desperate to get a husband, where she's just like, I want the one that's kind of real.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he is like the Bruce Wayne of the Regency. I'm like, alright.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, you are perfect. There's some edges we have to smooth out, but like, you're the best option.
I guess.
Sure, yeah. though watching this movie for this video, I was like, they really are just making the late Donald Sutherland being like, yeah, okay, I approve. Like throughout this movie, he's like, yes, okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
I don't
Do you
think
have
I
any
would agree
thoughts?
with that statement because, like, to be like yes and okay to all his daughters like that, I'm sure he gets a lot of like shit from outside of like society, outside of his family.
Huh.
So I think he definitely has a backbone. He just like doesn't show it around his family, and but he does with his, you know, when Mr. Collins proposes to Elizabeth and the mom's like demanding, "Oh, you ungrateful child, marry him right now,
yeah.
save our family," and he's like, she says first, the mother's like, "I'll never speak to you if you don't," and then he's like, "Oh, Lizzie, sorry, now you have to choose because I won't speak to you if you do." I was like, "Oh, you know,
I
Good
thought that's
dad.
true. Yeah.
good dad."
Yeah, and yeah, it's as Sia mentioned, like he does have a backbone because he had to ask her, like, do you love this man? And she has to go through the like this speech of like how they are very similar, and like how much she loves him and how much we have misunderstood the character of Mr. Darcy. And he was just overjoyed with like, I'm just so happy that you found somebody you love, rather somebody who will be a benefit to the family. Well, he's a very big benefit now, but like, but it's just like he was in tears that he's like, I will have not given you for less, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, he is a good dad. He just has horrible planning at the start, but he's a good dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, not gonna lie, after watching this movie, I was like, I kind of want to search out more movies or shows based on
Dude,
classical
again,
literature.
Bridgerton.
I have. I mean,
Yes.
Bridgerton is like more of a modern take on Regency era like literature and stuff, but I it's sort of in the same vein. I really love Elizabeth Gaskell's North and South. So there's a show. They made it into a series, and the main like male lead is played by Richard Armitage. So-
Oh,
That's a
okay.
Oh, Wolverine. Also, Thorn Oak and Shield.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know if you.
Yeah, I don't think that the viewers know he was Wolverine
Trevor
though.
from Castlevania. If you want
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Trevor. Forgot about that part too.
Yeah.
He plays Wolverine in the podcast. Like, anyway, just
Oh,
listen to
okay.
it.
Yeah,
That fits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
definitely.
So North and South is a recommendation. Like if you want to go into something as like period accurate and even the same, not the same storyline, but the same themes, but in a different setting.
okay.
North and South.
All
It's
right.
great.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll try to check that out. So it's a show.
Yeah, it's like a mini series. I think there's like 12 or 8
Episodes.
But yeah, this is why we brought Tion to this podcast. Because honestly, if it was just John and I talking about this movie, we'd be like, yeah, the costumes were nice. Yeah.
It would have been hilarious.
But I do want to add to like it's not just the costumes that's impressive. I think just like the sets and how they dress the sets were really impressive.
Definitely.
Like it really feels like lived in.
Yeah.
Especially like when you contrast like Pemberley and Netherfields to the house of the Bennets. You know, like even in a few scenes you can see like paint chipping off places in the doorway where the door like would hit or where the door jamb would lock. And I was like, wow, this is really like a family home. You know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
definitely.
like the world building is like really great in this movie.
Yeah.
I do agree. Like now that Sia mentioned it, is that like all the times like I tend to forget like, oh shit, this is a period piece, and I'm just like I'm just sucked into the story in of itself that I forget that it is a movie. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm very surprised. Again, I see what my sister and my mom and my girlfriend were talking about when they were like you have to watch Pride and Prejudice. I'm like, okay, you know. And sometimes period pieces don't need like a Civil War guy going into Japan and learning to be a samurai, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that story was true. Not gonna lie.
I mean, it's less. I think it's less likely than what we got in Shogun, where the guy's just like, I'm just being tossed around, don't know what to do.
Yeah, like as much as like we would like for it to be like giant wars and like war battles and like knights and other kind of period pieces, it is kind of nice to see
A
this
quieter
where
version.
it's like somewhat gossip girly but like,
Okay, yeah.
like
It's more like a look into women's lives because
yeah
that's pretty much all they had,
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't really get
social
that
life. And,
in movies or
Yeah.
shows. Unless it's like
instead
Vikings,
Yeah.
so you're like, oh damn, okay. I guess you're
Yeah,
the chieftain now.
here instead of like a tweet or a text message, they just have an ear to the door kind of deal. Just
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Going on
information.
the other side, yeah.
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 A lot of I feel like what makes this movie so like good in my mind is like the costumes, the set, and like the scoring. I'm such a big fan of the scoring of this movie.
Hmm.
Just like the because like usually like you'd expect like really like grand orchestral pieces, but a lot of the scoring is just like quiet, like unassumingly beautiful piano music, like piano playing, and it just like underscores, like the era and like how delicate relationships are there and like feelings that are budding and growing. It just really brings out a lot of feelings if you've taken the time to listen to the pieces. It's really great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I do see what you mean. I feel like it like fits like Elizabeth's character a lot
Yeah.
since
Yeah.
since the entire focus is on her.
Yeah, it's like it mirrors sort of like an internal like contemplation that she's doing in those scenes where the piano plays, and it's great.
Yeah.
Also the cinematography,
It's pretty good.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the transitions, the seamless transitions from like scene to scene. Like the biggest like example is how I forgot what it was transitioning from, but it was like the transition to the ball where it's just like a flame goes up and oh, they're suddenly in the ball. I think those are like genius. Those are beautiful
Yeah.
shots.
I
And
mean,
just like, go ahead.
oh sorry. There's a shot of Keira Knightley and Mr. Darcy in the field. Like she's in the foreground, he's in the background.
There's a lot of fields.
True.
Hold on, which one?
Like it's one of the posters, where I'm like, that looks pretty nice. Like going like again, trying this movie out for the first time, it was hard at first because I'm like, if this is a period piece that's quiet and it's subtle, there's no battles, you just have to sit down and listen.
I will admit, me and Enzo needed help.
Yeah. Again, if it was just the two of us, we'd be like, oh damn, what did Mr. Darcy say again?
Yeah.
I needed a lot of translation. It was just like, like a lot of times when they're just like going off about like, money this, like, oh, will you get married to that? I'm like, what do they mean? Like I had to go to my girlfriend and she's like, don't worry, I can explain everything. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I had to Google what no prospects means in like indefinite translation. I was like, oh, that's what that means. So I'm like, what the fuck do you mean no prospects? So I'm like, oh, okay.
I'm already a burden to my parents.
Yeah. Anything else to add before we wrap this up?
I think we've pretty much. I don't know. See ya.
See ya.
Sorry.
It's so funny. Like, I mean, of course, I've seen like online discourse about this movie, and it like, it's the biggest thing. I think it's also like important to like emphasize on or like talk about, because what Joe Wright really does well is just like the way he frames Darcy's like yearning for Elizabeth is so genius. Like it's a lot of like showing and not telling, because he gives a lot of space in the way he frames shots or what he chooses to put in frame, how much Darcy yearns for Elizabeth, but without like really like pointing it out or making someone say it. That's why you just have to watching it after you watch it the first time, watching it again, then you get like, oh, those were moments where Darcy was like, I love her so much. Like the first time she goes to Netherfield and he helps her onto the carriage, and he holds her, like he holds her hand, and then they drive off, and there's the shot of him walking away, and he like squeezes his hand. Every woman I know who has watched the movie has swooned over that scene because it's like, oh, his hands are burning
Yeah.
because he's like burning with love for her.
I think my girlfriend did mention that as well. Like with every like little nuance, she'll be like, "See that? You see that?" Like,
You see, yeah,
I'm like,
yeah. So I watched it like again in my like early 20s with my blockmates in Ateneo, and like um we just like decided to watch it all together. So we were like 5 women in a room, and we were all screaming at the same like quiet looks, the quirk of an eyebrow, the way he just like his eyes would follow her across the room. And yeah, I think it's just like the female gaze is so much different than the male gaze, and Joe Wright really like captured that well.
Yeah, there are moments when I was watching it where, like, when they would express feelings, I was like, since when? When did you feel this? And I had to be like, fuck, I have to rewind. I did. And I'm like, okay, now I get it. Yeah.
it is like, again, as I mentioned, it is kind of fun to see my girlfriend just like react to like, he's like, ah! I'm like, what happened?
Right?
Yeah, like my friend and I watched it last night, like because I wanted to prepare. I wanted to be prepared for this, and I was screaming in so many scenes. Like I have notes where it's just like, oh my gosh, his hand, the way he like flexed his hand, the way he like looked at her across the room, or like I guess the biggest like thing was how he just showed up in Mr. Collins's home before he confesses and was like, hey, how are you? And she's like,
It's like, okay,
good."
bye.
Okay, bye. Like that's such a big tell, and it's like, oh, he's really been like in love with her since the beginning.
Yeah. I wish I had someone when I was watching this, because like, what the fuck did I miss?
Let's rewatch it together, so
Yeah. Will do.
and you'll understand. I'll scream at all the same parts, and you'll be like, "What?" And I'll explain.
Yeah. That would save me a lot of time from rewinding, because I was literally like, I need to understand this movie. But yeah, I do agree this is one of Joe Wright's best movies, which is saying a lot since his recent track record is not the best. I think he did Pan with the one where they sing "Smells Like Teen Spirit," and I'm like, man.
I didn't know he did that one.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
I forgot. Well, I think he did the Churchill movie with Gary Oldman, which is a win. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a up and down career for sure, which is fine. But yeah, any last thoughts before we go to our ratings?
For me, I'm good. Like I've sang all my praises.
What would you rate Pride and Prejudice 2005?
Would you like to go first, Steve?
What's your rating system out of 5 stars?
I mean, it can be any for
Fine.
anyone. We usually go out of 10.
I'm definitely biased because like this is a movie that I've always come back to like at multiple times, multiple points in my life. So I'd say like a 10. If I could go higher than a 10, I would.
Okay.
I would. Sorry if you guys hear like there's a little bit of construction in your side. But yeah, for me, I would give this one like a solid 9. Sorry if I'm not giving it a 10, but I do see where like y'all are coming from, and it is like, yeah. Again, I was at the edge of my seat, just being like, what this bitch say, like, or like, who's this motherfucker? Like, I'm just like in it for the gossip. I feel like I already felt like I was the kind of person who would have their ear at the door while watching this movie. And I'm just like, God damn, well, I guess this is appropriate now. Like speaking of like tea and shit, and I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is an experience, and a very different one, because, well, clearly, and Enzo and I had different experiences, because he was completely lost while I had a bit of a guide into this movie. Yeah, it is very fun to watch this with my girlfriend, where she will be like, you see all these things? And I was like, I don't. And I'm like, I'm like, oh yeah, as Sia said, like the female gaze is completely different from like the male gaze, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I get you, and like like her pointing out like each step of like, oh, she doesn't have this, he has that, pretty much giving me a full translation into this movie, which made me appreciate it even more, which because kind of gave me and her a little bit of a bonding moment. Yeah, I don't know. This movie, I would like to rewatch this, even though it isn't, no pun intended, my cup of tea. I'm like, now that like I'm like, okay, I want to watch just to see the little nuances, and yeah, like as both of you mentioned, like the cinematography was great, the set design was also really good, and I also love, like Keira Knightley's acting here. Also, I really want to see that guy from the one that sang "Hey There, Delilah" again. He was great. I don't know if you guys get it because he looks like the main singer.
Of Plain
Who
White
sang
Tees.
"Hey There"? Yeah,
Oh.
look him up. I had to put a photo like that's Mr. Darcy right there.
We'll do. Yeah, I can't see myself giving this anything lower than a 9 because again, it's just like why give it less than a 9? I don't know. But it's a very. I will revisit this movie because I'm just like I missed a lot of things even when I was rewinding and being like, Mr. Google, please answer my questions. But it is well acted. The attention to detail is superb, and yeah, I agree with you and see the set design, the costumes, and the cinematography are perfect. Sorry, I had a stroke for a bit, but no, it is a pretty good historical piece with the caveat of like, as John mentioned, it's not like set in the American Civil War or has knights and has people fighting each other for scraps of land. It's just people being like, what did he say? Or what did she say? And if that's not, again, no pun intended, your cup of tea, that's fine. But I would suggest give this movie a chance because it is pretty good. Like when you really sit down and watch it and appreciate it, you will learn to like it a lot. That's what I learned this year, and hopefully I will revisit it soon or a couple of times with people around me to explain of like, oh, that's what he meant. Oh, okay, or that's what she meant. But yeah, it's a pretty good movie in my book, and for the rest of the hosts here, you can see that they really do like this movie. And yeah, to the audience watching, what's your favorite historical piece that's quiet? There's a lot apparently that I'm like, oh, now I have to go into. Can't think of any off the top of my head. Maybe the only thing I could think of is Spielberg's Lincoln, because I'm like, oh, it's just following Lincoln in his life.
King of Speech. That's one.
What speech?
King's Speech.
King's Speech.
King's Speech. Fuck. I haven't seen it in a while. Sorry.
The one where he's the stutter. Like
The stuttering like king.
Yeah.
I think that's also like a period piece. That's like, again, it's just the day in the life, and you seeing the world in of itself just in that time period. It's also nice. How about you, see?
I guess back to my recommendation, like North and South is really good. If you haven't seen it, it's great. It's not a movie, it's a series.
Yeah, for sure we'll give it a try since we are kind of getting into the whole like Regency, Bridgerton kind of era. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. Also, the Crown is pretty good. At first, I was like, why would I care about this family? But watching it, I'm like, oh, I'm learning so much. I hope what I'm learning is true. But yeah, it's pretty good. But yeah, that's been our video for Pride and Prejudice 2005. What do you guys think? If you like what you see here, please leave a like, subscribe, and ding the bell icon to get notified of when we upload next. We're also on Spotify and TikTok. TikTok to see our best and funniest moments, Spotify to hear us on the go. See, do you have anything to plug in?
No, I'm just around social media. Hi if you see me, hi if you don't.
Alright.
It's fine.
He just exists.
I just exist.
In the video, I am Zoda's Voices on TikTok and Ends Wolf on Letterboxd. How about you, Job? Where can they find you?
Oh, you can find me at JohnJuM_ on Instagram. It is my art account.
And yes, C will be here for a couple of other videos along the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, stay tuned for that. And we'll have other personalities soon. So yeah, fun times for GND. And we'll also have our 500 special lineup soon, which is pretty exciting.
When's that? Never mind. Don't answer that here.
And damn, someone's not paying attention to the Discord. That's fine.
Oh, wait. Work-life balance was never my thing. Excuse me.
That's fine. But yeah, in the meantime, we'll see you all on the next video. Bye, guys.
Ciao.